Hello and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into an economic theory that really defined the 20th century, but is now getting completely turned on its head by automation and artificial intelligence.
All right, let's get right to it. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with a theory that's under some serious pressure, then look at a tale of two factories and unpack the new equation for productivity. After that, we'll cover the human cost of all this, how it's changing global power, and finally, ask the big question: is the party over?
So, we're kicking things off with a classic economic concept, Karl Marx's theory of surplus value. For a long time, this was a key idea for explaining how profit was actually generated in our society.
The idea is pretty straightforward, right? Real value comes from human labor. A capitalist's profit is basically the difference between what a worker produces and what they get paid in wages. And for ages, this was a really powerful lens for understanding the economy. And this is the central question that modern automation forces us to ask. If the whole foundation of value is human work, what happens when you take the human out of the equation? It challenges the very core of the theory.
To really get a grip on the scale of this change, let's use a simple analogy our source uses: a showdown between two cake factories. It makes everything crystal clear.
Okay, so on one side, you've got a traditional factory with 100 workers. On the other, a nearly automated factory with just one supervisor and a machine. And the difference in what they can produce, it's just astronomical.
And with that kind of efficiency, the automated factory can sell its cakes at a price that makes competition totally impossible. We're talking $100 versus $1. There's just no way to compete with that.
So here's the crucial point. The factory that's based on human labor, even if it's socialized and fair to its workers, it simply can't survive. Technology has made its entire business model obsolete.
But why did the human factory go under? Well, the answer lies in a fundamental shift in the very definition of productivity and how value is created.
What we're seeing is this big transition. We've moved from an economy driven by human intelligence into one dominated by machine intelligence. Value isn't coming from human effort anymore, it's coming from the power of technology. And that brings us to a really powerful idea. Technology is no longer just a tool, it's becoming its own force of production. Just like the quote says, productivity now comes from the intelligence of machines. That's a complete game changer.
Just imagine this future scenario. If almost 100% of productivity is coming from an AI, how can anyone argue that the surplus value comes from that single human worker? The old model completely falls apart.
This economic shift isn't just about numbers and factories, you know? It has deep and, frankly, disturbing consequences for society. And the social result of all this is pretty worrying. As human labor becomes less and less necessary, what emerges is this huge population of inactive people, without a role, dependent on government support, and feeling a deep sense of uselessness and despair.
And according to the source, this hopelessness has a dangerous political consequence. The argument presented is that people who feel they have no function and no hope become easy targets for extremist movements because they're desperate for the sense of purpose they've lost.
This dynamic doesn't just reshape societies from the inside. It completely reorders power on a global scale, creating new kinds of influence and dependency.
We're watching a new form of global power emerge, where owning the technology is actually more powerful than controlling territory or a workforce, and, according to our source, the center of that power is on the move.
This creates a new global divide. On one side, you have the tech owners, who control the patents and call the shots. On the other, the tech dependents, whose economies could literally collapse if their access to that technology is cut off. A productivity crisis can become a social crisis overnight.
So, where does all this leave us? The source uses a really powerful metaphor to describe the era we're in now, one that really captures the feeling that something big is changing. The metaphor is that we've been living through this decades-long blowout party of growth and abundance, but it feels like the party is ending, and what's left is the hangover. Scarce resources, and a society reacting with desperation.
And all of this demands a complete shift in our focus. You know, the great economic debate of the past was all about the exploitation of labor. But now, the problem is something else entirely.
The fundamental question has changed. It's not about how wealth is produced anymore, it's about who has a right to it.
The old fights over exploitation are giving way to a much more complex question.
And that leaves us with this final, provocative question that really defines the economic and moral challenge of our time. It's no longer about fighting for surplus value, but about deciding how to distribute the incredible wealth that technology promises to create. And that's a question we don't have an answer to yet.